Shin Buddhism was founded by Shinran in, I think, 13th century. The idea came originally from India, from Buddha, or Amida Buddha, the Buddha, into China and into Japan. And there are changes, and when Shinran started to study the Buddhism, he went through various hurdles. I want to talk about the nature of his life and how he came up with this idea of Shin Buddhism, or following the law or Amida for compassion. And there's such an interesting life story that I found from one of the YouTube video. It's called the Shinran Shonin. I can post in the description how you get there. Actually, it's a cartoon, almost 2 hours long, but I found very inspiring. And I want to go over a few stories that I think it may be meaningful to share whoever is interested in the spiritual pursuit. For those who may be interested in the spiritual pursuit. Ultimately, the idea is to find a way how to live well. So I'm sure there's some connection for everyone. But when he was born, from the beginning he had some difficulties of losing his parents early. So what he did was, at the age of 9, I think it was a suggestion from others, he went to study Buddhism in the Mount Hiei, which is very famous for those who seek for enlightenment or awakening. From the age 9 to 29, for 20 years, he went through hard training to become a monk, studying different sutras and practicing meditation and living with other monks. But he realized that he still had the delusionary thought, and he gave up to try harder anymore at the age 29. So he went down to the town of Kyoto and found Honen, who is known to be a practitioner of Pure Land Buddhism, following the idea of Amida Buddha. So he spent many days with Honen and practiced Nenbutsu, which is Namu Amida Butsu. The simple idea is we have delusion and suffering, so the way to go beyond the delusion, take care of the delusion, is to depend on Amida Buddha. He called it the other power because it is due to the fact that his approach in Mount Hiei didn't work for him. He explained the approach he practiced in Hiei is a self-power. You are driving yourself to go through meditation, practicing lots of disciplines, and learning all the sutras, but he couldn't find the peace in his mind. And he had this delusionary thoughts, suffering. So he thought he couldn't handle anymore for that 20 years he spent. He was looking for other solution, and that's the other power from Amida Buddha. The practice was successful, and so successful that more people are joining with him and Honen. But the problem they faced was that this is more for those common person, ordinary person, and more people are joining. And the people or the monks in here felt threatened their idea, the practice of Zen and others. So there was the internal difficulties, if you call that, in these days of developing the Buddhism in Japan. So what happened is that because of the connection to the governance in Japan, the governors decided that Honen and Shinran has to be dispelled out of Kyoto. And he spent time in the rural countries, but it turned out that the people, the ordinary people, was the right audience. So it was a hardship to leave Kyoto, but took that opportunity to see if they can convey the message with those ordinary person, peasant, farmers, anybody like that. So he spent 5 years, and later he went to different part of Japan called Hitachi and did the same thing instead of coming back to Kyoto. When he was 80 years old, he went back to Kyoto because there was lots of sutras and documents available that he wanted to study and put his thoughts together. So the people in Hitachi, many miles away, so he had his son dispatched because of his son's will to teach those people in Hitachi. But later found that his son couldn't share the essence of this teaching and modified it to confuse people. Father and son connection. Few years later, one of the monk with Shinran named Yuinen had a moment to share with Shinran and mentioned that he practiced Nenbutsu, believing the vow of Amida, but still he had the delusion. So he had this doubt, which he shared with Shinran. Listening to Yuyen, Shinran shared his view with Yuyen, that he had the same doubt. So Shinran is the same as Yuyen, but Shinran realized that this is the very reason that if we are left alone, we get deluded. And that's the reason why Amida's vow is there. So it's natural as a human being to get into the deluded thought and go through suffering. And that is the very reason of practicing Nenbutsu. So Yuyen was happy to hear that. The point is everybody is the same so far as they are human beings, have delusionary thought, and there's no way self-power to overcome. And that's the very reason of Amida's vow. He was already after 80 years old. He lived until 90 years, writing many documents so that the whole teaching, the idea of Amida's vow is understood with many others. That was the beginning of Shin Buddhism. The document, the thought, and the difficulties everybody go through. And Shinran is not the Messiah, so to speak. He is one of those, as if he's the same layman. And that is the very reason of this teaching. Or teaching is not the teaching because you are not to learn, but just to have faith in Amida Buddha and practice this idea, Namu Amida Butsu, which basically says, I will let go of myself for the vow of Amida to save us. I found this story very inspiring. And I think about all the religious organization, there's a founder and the idea get corrupted. So whether it's Shin Buddhism or even Christianity or Zen, there are periods of going through difficulties. There are certain inertia, momentum, fixed way of thinking, and lose the main track of pursuing the spiritual awakening. Be humble, go back to the basics, and make sure that we follow the basic principles. I think that was his awakening, realization, and confession. And for that, he spent so much time and energy. Whatever the reason is, that one person going through difficulties, even within the family and himself, kept his spirit and moved on. Whether that is the right religion or not for you or me or whoever, the spirit behind Shinran and the fact that so many people following his view in Japan, to have this Shin Buddhism become the largest following. It got the largest following in Japan. To me, that's amazing. Not to mention those Myokonin that I shared seem to capture the essence of what Shinran believed. And they are the laymen realizing their lack of skills to go through training, following the discipline, but still capture the essence of Shinran. I'm very much inspired, relating to the compassionate sense that I found from this story. Thank you.